Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Week That Was. I'm Saeed Khan, and I am joined by some newbies, some people who are going to be, well, I was going to say baptized by fire, but maybe not quite as genteel or gentile as that, but we're going to...
Whatever.
Help yourself.
Ramadan's over, man. I mean, I've got full blood sugar now. Joining us today, we have attorney Joel Sklar.
Good morning.
We have attorney Sandy Plotkin.
Greetings.
Also joining us are our regulars. We have Deadline Detroit columnist Greg Bowens.
Hello, hello.
We have Nancy Derringer.
Hey.
And of course, we have editor-in-chief of Deadline Detroit, Allan Lengel. So, the Supreme Court of the United States has sometimes been referred to as a coven. And clearly here, to make a reference to Harry Potter, we might have a leaky cauldron at the very center of it. It seems as though in the case of Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, the Mississippi case, which has the potential of overturning an almost 50-year-old Roe versus Wade, giving women access to reproductive rights, it seems that this purloined opinion may give insight as to the way that the majority is going. Come on, Nancy.
The purloined opinion? Okay, whatever. Keep going. I like it.
Well, it looks like there's some insight as to particularly what Associate Justice Samuel Alito has in mind of the way that Roe versus Wade might be dismantled. It doesn't seem as though it's coming as much of a surprise given the kind of foreboding that everyone had after the oral arguments and the current composition of the court. But of course, it is no less settling when we realize that we're on the threshold of the possibility of well-settled law is now going to go into oblivion. So let's start then with SCOTUS. Who's got an opinion about this perspective?
I'll just, I think the opinions, I tried to get through the whole thing. It wasn't that easy. But it was one of the more angry opinions I've ever written. It was vitriolic. The tone was condescending to every precedent beforehand.
Yep.
It was the tenor was shocking and somewhat frightening because it was so militant. The analysis, from whole cloth, to be honest with you, I think there was, because abortion wasn't mentioned in the Constitution, it's not protected, was alluded. It's just really a frightening opinion that sets the stage as a slippery slope to start taking away a bunch of rights. Once you give somebody say it's a fundamental right that we've given you, you can't take it back.
Exactly.
You can't do that.
Oh, yeah? And
that's exactly what they're doing. And giving the states' rights, the ability to legislate on issues like this, we may as well just roll back, just start rolling, think Griswold's gone, mixed marriages, it's the insanity, homosexuality will be outlawed. Same-sex marriages you can step back because precedent apparently means nothing. Mm-hmm. So I was remarkably disturbed when I read the opinion. I've read quite a few, and this was the angriest I've ever written.
Joel, but isn't it coming back to what everyone knew from the beginning, the inception of Roe? The foundation was fragile. It was about as firm as my ex-marriage. And, but really, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg a million years ago said Roe went too far with what they were trying to do. They made it too sweeping without a sound foundation. You rely now on penumbras from Griswold, right? And, there's always been the specter that if you allowed a majority on the court that would go ahead and do it, it wouldn't be that difficult for a guy like Alito to author the menacing opinion you're summarizing for today.
So let me go ahead and give a little bit of insight for our audience. So Griswold versus Connecticut, which was cited both by Joel and Sandy, was a case from the late 60s based on
early 60s,
sorry,
yeah.
On a Connecticut statute which actually had outlawed the sale of contraceptives to even married couples.
Right.
That and a companion case which had to do with the sale of contraceptives to anybody were both overruled by the Supreme Court. Justice William Douglas, I believe, came up with the idea of, while there is no explicit fundamental right of privacy in the Constitution, that privacy is there in the penumbras of various other amendments in the Bill of Rights. And as a result of it, that was going to then be how we were going to settle that law. And that was, of course, the cornerstone that was then used by Justice Blackmun in the 7-2 opinion, which was Roe v. Wade in 1973. Some would argue, as Sandy has, that then creates a kind of fragility upon which things were done. So let me ask the question. Why did nobody try to, either at the federal level or at the state level, get a constitutional amendment that actually explicitly stated that Americans have a fundamental right to privacy?
Because they had Roe. They had, I think it was, a constitutional amendment. When was the last constitutional amendment that passed in this country? It's just, that is such a huge
congressional pay raise.
Yeah.
Well, how about the fact that this country's never been united? It's never been one country, never been one nation, never been one belief. There is no soul of America for Biden to recapture. There's no unification. So you want to pass sweeping constitutional amendments based on such a fractious issue? Good luck, because we've been divided for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. The founding fathers, it was really Jefferson's grandfather was a founding father, not him. And it's always been disarray. Well, I guess you're talking to a guy that doesn't really see such unification for a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as long as they had Roe, they didn't need the constitutional amendment. And until only fairly recently was there, people have been bitching about Roe from the beginning, but only until fairly recently did its actual overturning become a real possibility. And it was with the Trump administration, because he got to a point, thanks to Mitch McConnell, and he's got Justice stole a seat. He's got Justice Handmaid.
Is he also Indian? Like the other person you were talking about?
No. Justice stole a seat, Justice Handmaid, and Justice Strip Search Sammy. No, I'm sorry. That was the Justice Kavanaugh, the rapist.
A friend of
would-be rapist, I should say. But anyway, my point is that they didn't really need it because they had Roe. And even though, I know that we've all heard those stories about Republicans who said, if Roe v. Wade's ever overturned, we're going to lose the next election by 20 points. Because the idea is that it's there. A large minority hates it and yells about it all the time. But as long as it's there, it's okay. It's good for the Republicans because they could fundraise around abortion. It's good for the Democrats because it made abortion legal. But but now we have these lunatic originalists who say, well, because abortion's not in the Constitution, it's not a constitutional right. It's like, cars aren't in the Constitution. Telephones aren't in the Constitution. There are a million things.
How about voting? That's not in the Constitution. A right to vote.
Voting? Oh, well.
It's not. They didn't want it. Madison wanted you to own land, free and clear.
A right to own slaves was not in the Constitution. And
but there's all kinds of things that are not in the Constitution. And it's stupid to act as though this originalist argument that if it's not in the Constitution, it has to be somewhere else. And so, then there's been, go ahead.
But is this, Nancy, really originalism? The very idea of throwing stare decisis, the whole kind of deference to precedent, that seems to be the most judicially activistic act I've ever seen.
Originalism has always been bullshit. It's always been
ideology.
Yeah, it's what we say it is. It's like, tell me what Bush versus Gore, where is that in the Constitution, for Christ's sake? It's just, it's, go ahead, Joel.
You're right. But what I thought what Alito did is he cited these arguments. Hey, this is fractious. Nobody agrees. We're always supposed to give stability because it hasn't, because there's still people who say we don't accept it. Now we're going to wipe it away, which is crazy to me. Because there's a minority of people who are very vocal and very well organized. You're going to say that's the factious. This is what's going on with the world. It's this decisive that we have to wipe it out and give it back to the states.
Yeah.
Does he even mention in the opinion, Joel, the 9th Amendment?
I don't know. I
don't think he does. I think he says, take your penumbras, shove them up your ass, but make sure it's a different sex person that shoves them up your ass. Because same-sex shoving of penumbras is not found in the Constitution. No, but it's really, he totally disregarded the whole underpinning of Roe.
Right. The ends justified the means for him.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I need to ask you, that this was a draft, and so are these just his, the thoughts, a draft thought, and it's not even, we're arguing about it, or we're talking about it as if it's actually done. I mean, drafts are, just that, drafts. So while the overall sort of thrust of what the decision could be is there, the particulars are not. So I find it difficult to argue the particulars of the draft because I think in some ways it takes away from the decision itself. The bottom line is, however they end up wording this thing, is that these rights that we have come to get used to for women could be taken away.
So
and
I think the only question is really, is John Roberts going to vote for it? I think other than that, I mean, Alito's language is so, as Joel was saying, I mean, condescending and so strong that I don't think there's any, and for the other justices to sign off on it and say, yeah, he's speaking for us, I think it's really a question of whether John Roberts will vote for it, and that's not going to matter.
Well,
he excoriates Ginsburg. I mean, he just excoriates.
Greg is right about the nature of a draft, but at the same time, I mean, do we even get to see drafts of I mean, this kind of is the pivot point to talking about the leak.
Right.
But I mean, this is sort of a peephole into the process of how these things are written. Is this typical? Do they generally start out as raving and get the edges sanded off? I don't know.
My guess is this: is that Alito was assigned to write the opinion for the majority, has written that opinion for the majority. It'll be distributed among the court, and it will change. I'm sure it will change.
So I think part of that,
the heart of it, I don't think is going to change. I think Roe is going to be overturned.
Yeah.
The language may be softened. There'll be dissenting opinions, obviously, other opinions, perhaps joint opinions, concurring opinions, but I'm relatively confident Roe's over.
So I'm wondering, I mean, from correct me if I'm wrong, but usually if the Chief Justice is on the side of the majority, it's his privilege to then assign who writes the majority opinion. The fact that Alito is writing it, I just can't see Roberts assigning it, which makes me think that he's an outlier in this. And I'm thinking that then the next senior justice would who's in the majority would do so, and that's Thomas. So I actually think that this is going to be a majority of maybe 5-4.
Yeah.
And Roberts is going to at best write a concurring opinion. But I don't think it's going to be that much, which of course then is really interesting given the fact that they're overturning on a 5-4 an opinion that was 7-2 back in 1973. But Joel, I want to pick up on this point about that you mentioned about just how poorly worded and how vitriolic this opinion is. Gone are the days of Learned Hand and Brandeis and the real wordsmiths on the court. I mean, we can't expect it, but I don't even see someone like Bork writing such a lousy opinion.
Yeah.
It seems as though he would have had a little bit more fidelity to the integrity of the court. Is this really what we're going to have moving forward? And also with that, and I think someone mentioned, what does this say about Justice Roberts and his sense of legacy? Because this is going to be his court forever and ever that decides this.
He's lost control of his court, I think.
Yeah. And
come on, man. Nobody thinks about I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're going.
Nerds do.
Saying, nerds.
Roberts does. I mean, I think Roberts. I mean, we've been told that Roberts is very much worried about that the court is being seen as politicized.
Yeah, but his fragile ego is not the.
I know.
What?
I realize that.
Sorry. Go seek some psychotherapy, Roberts. But you know what? You've lost control of the court.
Right, and so you're going to see more opinions like this. That's what's scary. You're going to see a court that's really quite divided, philosophically, politically, and even colloquially, I guess. Be able to get congeniality-wise, I think this is going to cause a problem because this is such a heartfelt issue. But I think the courts are the pillar of democracy, one of the pillars of democracy. And my concern is this one. I'll go on to civil rights. Mm-hmm. And we're just seeing the deterioration of the things that my generation took for granted. and I consider us the worst generation. We didn't do shit. But this is you know, the best generation, we're the worst generation.
Smoked a lot of weed,
the changes that came about because of your generation. I mean, I'm Generation X. So when I was born in the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, all those things that just happened, allowing people to have to get married across lines, the Loving decision, 1967, abortion. All this stuff had happened, and now you guys are undoing it.
Right. I mean,
it's like you guys are crazy. The boomers are crazy. You give us all this stuff, and then you take it all back before you die.
And you know,
the boomers didn't give you Loving. Come on, this was
he said Gen X, and I agree with you. But you know, at the same time, Greg, I mean, we were responsible for breaking up the Beatles. That happened. That happened on our watch. So, you know, we have to deal with that. But what does this say then about stare decisis? I mean,
well, it says Brett Kavanaugh is a big fat liar. I mean, for starters,
they're all.
And so is
Kavanaugh.
It's a stare decisive is convenient if you need it to be, and inconvenient if you don't. That it just means it's just another word, another phrase that's supposed to have meaning that doesn't. And that's what's so disappointing for lawyers.
You bring up Kavanaugh, and I've heard about impeachment being whispered because they lied.
Happened. I mean, never happened.
Well,
do you mean Susan Collins is going to be very disappointed in that young man?
I think lying. I think Trump has taken lying. He's devalued the truth so much that the idea of actually getting rid of someone for lying is just not going to happen. Look, it's just not going to happen. What are they would probably need 60 votes from the Senate for impeachment. I mean, it's never going to happen. Nothing what any Republican does, as long as you need 60 votes, they're never going to remove anyone for anything.
Yeah, and it's dangerous precedent to impeach it. You know, once you're on, it's a dangerous precedent as well because you don't like the opinion. That's a whole other issue.
Not that you don't like the opinion, that you lied in your hearings about what you would do. I mean, certainly people are able to
lot of them lie. A lot of them lie
in hearings all the time.
Right. Every time.
But this is the Supreme Court. If we can't trust you to tell the truth to be a sitting justice, then we fall apart.
Every time Roe versus Wade came up during any of those hearings, a lot of these people just
remember. Thomas said he'd never discussed it. I believe Clarence Thomas during his hearings, but
he never discussed the insurrection with Jenny either. So you know what the hell do you think?
But I mean,
he did discuss that cocaine though.
Well, he did more than discuss it. It was disgusting. Yeah.
All right, there you go.
Sandy, all I know is I can never look at an eclipse the same way again after you were talking about penumbras the way you did. Don't look at it directly. But this idea that, look, I mean, the Supreme Court has issued decisions that we can all say were pretty lousy. Dred Scott, Plessy versus Ferguson, Korematsu. We disagreed with them, but at least we believed in the fidelity of the system. There was still a faith that stare decisis and the history and the legacy of the court would be maintained. This seems to be something really different.
It is.
Well, can I just, in terms historically, how out of touch? People say, well, if you look at polling numbers, there could be a blue wave in the midterms because this opinion, if written, is so out of step with I think there was polling that 45% of those who identified as Christian evangelicals believe there should be a right of access to abortion. I mean, you've got polling numbers suggesting nationwide this is completely out of step. But you've got Abbott down in Texas, and they want, cops going into bedrooms and whatnot, which is what Griswold literally was trying to prevent. Texas is now trying to say, no, there could be probable cause for a cop to come in and look for a condom. So I just want to read something very quickly that Ginsburg criticized Roe for going too far, which I was saying a while, and this is what she said, that the court would have been wiser to issue a brief ruling that struck down the, quote, extreme statute before it, referring to the Texas law dating to 1854 that made all abortions a crime except for saving the life of the mother. So they want to go back even prior to an 1854 statute in Texas. I mean, and you want to talk about extreme.
I think someone has already introduced a bill in Mississippi to ban in vitro fertilization, IUDs, certain forms of hormonal birth control, and they have declared that life begins at fertilization.
And also online sale of
for
Plan
cloning.
B. I think they're going after online sale of Plan B.
That's entirely possible as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I was one of those people who said earlier this week, they'll never go after birth control. They'll never go after interracial marriage. I mean, Clarence Thomas is in an interracial marriage, but I think I was wrong. I think I was wrong on that one. I think clearly they're going to go after at least some forms of birth control. I think same-sex marriage is absolutely on the chopping block, though, at least in the South and other conservative states.
Well, I mean, if you're kicking it back to the states now, and the states can make the laws, then yeah. So
right.
Well, then we will have a civil war. It'll be let's see. We have to, sorry, Clarence and Ginny, you're going to have to move to Massachusetts or someplace that tolerates.
Maybe we've had an ongoing civil war.
Yeah, we have been. There has been a civil. I think we are involved in a civil war, but maybe without all the violence, although there's some. But certainly, I agree with Sandy. I think the deterioration just continues and continues.
This is just the culture war taken to the highest levels. I mean, it's just all-out war now. I mean, this is really.
But codified.
We shouldn't throw around war so flippantly because people die with war.
Well, people die during abortion. There are people being shot, doctors being shot. People have been beat up outside of abortion clinics. It's a war. I mean, the cultural war here is really taken to a whole new level now with this.
It's been skirmishes. Now it's a war. Have you done much research into like the history of when states began to legalize abortion? Like when Roe was handed down when I was, I think, a sophomore in high school. I was 15 years old, I think. But by then I was in high school, and we all knew about those kids. We all knew about those girls who got knocked up, and they went to New York City. And an ACLU lawyer was telling me about the scene at the Columbus airport, the 7 a.m. flight to New York. It was full of young women, some teenagers with their mothers, and they would get on the flight, go to New York, go to the whatever clinic they had the appointment at, and then they would all be back at 5 p.m. for the flight home to Columbus. So it was like a one-day trip. But the reason New York legalized before, other states is because Rockefeller was governor at the time. And this was a Republican issue. These were Republicans who pushed for the liberalization of abortion laws, because the Republicans at that time were not, the Democrats at that time, rather, were beholden to the Catholic vote. And as many people have pointed out, the Catholics were like the only religious organization at the time of any note that objected to abortion. Protestants were pretty much silent on it. I'm sure there were probably, you Jews can fill me in on that, but I mean, it was a Catholic issue, and because there was a much larger Catholic, or at least the labor movement was much more Catholic, it was Democrats had to worry about that, and so it happened in Republican states that were run by Republicans. So I mean, the next time somebody tells you, well, Democrats were the ones who, were slaveholders in the South, it's like, things change over time.
So we have joined a rather august League of Nations, shall we say, including Chile, the Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Malta, and I know this is shocking to most of you, the Vatican City.
Shitholes, all of them.
that have outlawed abortion categorically. We are now in the company of these nations. Seems like not to bother many people who are advocating for this. But what about Michigan? I mean, here there is, of course, for us, a firewall of what could be done. So even if a state like, say, Oklahoma now starts to say, we're going to outlaw the word no as the next line after outlawing contraceptives, what can be done and what is being done here in Michigan?
Well,
the greatest organizing effort ever for a midterm election. Yeah,
It is.
Gretchen Whitmer and Dana Nessel have been very outspoken by saying they are not going to allow Michigan to become this. And at the same time, every single Republican who is vying for the gubernatorial nomination has declared themselves strongly pro-life, and they will fight against that. So,
but Nancy, what about that election the other day out in the West Side? The 72nd dude, the guy who said, "Hey, if we get ready,
right.
tell my daughters enjoy it for God's sake."
Right,
so you know, he gets smacked down pretty hard by a red district that said, "You know what, dude? There actually is a line of civility across."
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens in November. But yeah, you're right. I think there is definitely. I mean that guy was outrageous. I mean,
totally. But I'll tell you. And he was playing up, and he probably realized it that night. Oh shit! I thought that was our script to be outrageous, go too far. Well,
I don't think he was repudiated by Republican voters on the basis of his feelings on abortion. I could be wrong, but
no, you may be right.
I may be right too. So, you may be right. I mean, let's see what happens in November. I mean, I think that's going to be a much more telling election.
But
go ahead.
No, I was going to say the fear of Michigan, and then Greg raises, it's a great organizing effort. It's a great organizing effort nationally, but Michigan keeps getting referenced by these so-called pundits, academics, fearing a civil war, civil unrest, as Michigan is one of the 3 key states it could break out in. I mean, you get out of any urban area, you get outside of Ann Arbor in Washtenaw County, it's Madland. I live 15 minutes south of Ann Arbor. In 20, I put lawn signs up. They were snatched every day, and I was told it was by men in pickup trucks that were trustees of the local townships.
Sure.
I had a talk with a friend the other day, and I said, I'm literally afraid to put up a lawn sign this fall because I'm afraid of people shooting through my windows.
Put a camera out and see what you can do about that. But I mean, I can, in this state, all I can imagine are families driving up to the cottage in the UP or Traverse City or someplace like that. And it's like, Mama, I got shotgun. Kids, keep your eyes out of that minivan because we're going through some hostile country around here. So,
Greg.
And I knew about that. I mean, you start driving around, you gotta kind of keep your eyes open and keep your head on a swivel for whatever whatever little town that you might go through that might not be all that friendly. And so, I mean, I feel you when you say that. At the same time, let's be honest, folks aren't really. They talk a lot of talk a big game. True. But where the rubber meets the road, you don't have a lot of folks that are really to grab that shotgun, Martha, and stand your ground.
You might be surprised. You might be surprised how many people are out there with their guns already. When you talk about it is a war. I mean, look what we've seen in the last. I mean, Trump also took it to a whole new level. I mean, when we had the COVID issue. People showing up to the capitals with like assault weapons and stuff. That looks like a war to me. And now
they're only doing it because they know they're not going to be shot at. They're not doing it because they're going to actually confront
people thinking of kidnapping the governor. That looks like a war to me. People like cheering over, willing to fight over masks and vaccinations. There's a lot, and the abortion thing is just really when you start talking about abortion, gay marriage, all the issues that hit in Christianity. Once people throw God into the mix, they'll do anything. We've seen that all over the world.
Except die.
No, people will die for God.
Yeah,
people
Greg,
will die.
Greg, I mean, you got to realize, Greg, that when you talk about the rubber meeting the road up there, it's gravel. So
it's totally different. A beat rock and throw it at somebody. That's about it.
And this is why I don't ever travel up there with a canoe strapped to my car because I don't want to think of deliverance.
but before, I mean, truly saying, all right, blue, red, Democrat, Republicans, they con their base. They want to take away your health care, but it's all about socialism, blah, blah, blah. Well, the Democrats haven't exactly figured out how to message to people in need.
No,
And it isn't, you got people that have just, whether you refer to them as left behind, has never been in the mainstream, don't have this, don't have that. The fact is, there's a huge swath of people, and neither the Democratic Party nor the Republican Party has really, frankly, given enough of a shit about them to really bring them into the fold. And they're pissed, they're angry, they're frightened. They don't.
I think Democrats have given a shit, but it's very hard to compete with the right-wing echo chamber / propaganda network. I mean, Hillary Clinton had reams of policy proposals that would have helped working people. But all we heard about was, her emails and, it's insane. And I don't know what to tell people. I mean, it's hard to resist the impulse to say you are too stupid to vote, but that's kind of how
I hear you. And I think one of the things that needs to come forward is more of what that state legislator did not too long ago in taking on those remarks. If Hillary Clinton would have been on that debate stage with Trump stalking behind her, if she'd have turned around and said, "If you don't back up for me, I'm gonna slap the shit out of you,"
and get an Academy Award right after.
Absolutely. But I'm just saying, Trump and the folks like that are bullies. How many times did we see Trump skitter off the stage because he thought somebody was about to shoot at him or something? He told everybody to march on the Capitol, and nobody believed that he was going to get out front and run up the Capitol stairs and do anything. And so we know deep in our bones that, that many of these folks are bullies and cowards. And that's why I'm saying, I feel you on putting your sign out and having people in the truck get out there and do it. But Nancy's right. You put a camera out there and put some lights up there and put a sign up there that says, trespassers will be shot. They will stop stealing your sign.
How can they stop it? My neighbor down the street showed me his big wooden fence he built that I can't build shit, but he built this big wooden thing, put 2 big Biden-Harris signs on each side, and in between 3 inches, you saw nothing but wire. So the next day when the trustees came, they were shaking off his wooden, electrified fence. Well, but I mean, true story.
That's what we have to do to protect political.
He's teaching me how to use a hammer to nail this fall.
Yeah, we have to electrify
to you and to Nancy. But Greg, my question is, and Nancy, my question is, you're right. The Democrats, I truly believe, do care. But how do they message? Hillary Clinton couldn't message. The DNC can't message. How do we message?
James Carville knows how to message.
By being real, man. We're Detroiters, it's like anything else.
But how do you message up?
Better back the fuck up.
How do you message?
I'm a man of peace. Let me say that. And I shouldn't use that kind of language. I apologize for that, folks. That's not really who I am.
Telling the truth has not worked so far. I mean, we can't. It's too hard to cut through the static. So I wish I had an answer to it, and I don't.
The irony is that in many of these rural communities, I mean, the abortion rate is probably higher than it is in urban areas.
So.
Mm-hmm.
Those that would use these services,
teenage pregnancies, absolutely, you're right.
Yeah.
Growing up in Lapeer, I mean, we didn't fly from Columbus to New York. There were people who just simply drove west on I-69, no pun intended, to Flint to Planned Parenthood. So, I mean, and that was the feeder for so many communities in the Thumb.
The flights to New York were before Roe v. Wade. So after Roe v. Wade, the flight stopped. So.
There are going to be a lot of men that are going to regret this. For their share of responsibility in this. And I got to tell you, I mean, I'm the product of a teenage pregnancy. And, that of course, at the time when I was born, Michigan, the Roe v. Wade hadn't happened yet. And, still there were options. I'm glad that she chose to have me because I got to meet Nancy. How cool is that?
We're happy too.
And you helped break up the Beatles.
and so I, and I'm grown now. And what I'm trying to say is that I don't have to make the kind of decision that women have to make when it comes to this. And no matter how I may feel about abortion, the truth of the matter is that I want the person that is alive today, that woman, to be alive and to be able to make her choice in a way that allows for her to continue to live, to not have to go to some back alley thing or anything like that and risk her life. I don't think that's right. I don't think as a society that we should be forcing women into that kind of situation. It just doesn't, it's just wrong.
So
it's wrong. This question has been settled. So you want to argue about when the soul gets in the body and when life begins and all that stuff?
Can't do that.
You don't know.
Yeah.
At the same time, you know, you can't put women in danger like this. They're the ones that have to make this decision, and we need to be able to give them space to do that in a safe way to make that happen.
Well, you know what's interesting is that at least what Roe did is it tried to weigh the constitutional, balances really between the state and the individual. And what Alito's draft opinion does, it gives nothing to that. There's no constitutional balance. For instance, does the fetus have a constitutional right at all? At what time does a fetus have a constitutional right? At what time does that constitutional right overwhelm that of the host, the mother? And I think those issues are the constitutional issues. And it's the host, it's the living being over her body that should have dominion. I mean, what I've been hearing about masks is that it's my body, my mask, freedom. Well, what the hell is this? This is something with your body. And the government should be telling you what you can or can't do with your body. That is terrifying.
Well, what they're saying is an embryo has more rights than a woman.
Correct. And how do you make that assessment?
Does Alito at least make a point to outlaw vasectomy? I mean, God gave me this shit, so
that should be outlawed, by the way.
Kids,
right? Maybe.
What about that?
He might have taken the fifth on that, Sandy.
Yeah,
but,
maybe.
I mean, what about the idea of that? I mean, this invariably, and not that the court cares, but this violates the Establishment Clause because it is a very specific definition of abortion. And I suspect that there are quite a few people of certainly outside the Christian community for sure, but even within Christianity who do not subscribe to what they then claim is when life begins. But, so much for the First Amendment.
Yeah. Hey, I'm a Christian. Throw us all in there.
I didn't throw all of you, man. Come on, keep up.
If you're looking for if you really want to marinate in depression this weekend, as we wait for the weather to finally get warm, there's a great small indie movie that came out a couple years ago called Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, about a teenage girl seeking an abortion in today's climate. She lives in, I think she also has to travel to New York, and the navigation of the whole process is really, really sensitively and terrifyingly portrayed. And, it'll leave you feeling like shit, but a better kind of shit. So
obviously then I think we can all agree this is going to be an issue coming up in the midterms. Hopefully, I mean, it would seem that if nothing else will exercise people, then this should be one. But there's also the issue of the Federal Reserve raising the interest rate by 0.5 percentage point, which is the biggest increase in 2 decades to thwart inflation, which is at about a 40-year high. First of all, is this going to do anything to make a dent in inflation, and especially with the midterms coming up? And second of all, how strong is our economy? Are we heading toward a recession? We got 3.6% unemployment. The stock market isn't doing as well as it was perhaps last year, but it seems like the fundamentals are there.
For the fundamentals for a recession?
That's a good point. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an economist, but which way is it going?
I'm not an economist either, but I remember in the early 80s when
we're short on economists on this panel.
The truth is we're all economists because we're making economic decisions, based on our own calculations of what's going on.
No, that makes us consumers, Greg. It makes us consumers.
No. We're making economic decisions based on, how we read the tea leaves as well. We're doing our own math.
Okay.
I was going to say, in the early 80s, when we had a recession in Michigan, really a depression, when Reagan took office, the inflation under Jimmy Carter was extremely high, but then unemployment with Reagan was extremely high as well. It doesn't seem all the elements at least at this point, there's a lot of distinction between now and then. So I think, I don't know. It's interesting, but I don't think we're quite. I don't think it's imminent. But.
Well, pundits seem to think, Allan, that perhaps the Fed's not being aggressive enough, that we could be seeing some serious recession coming into the fall, just in time for the midterms, and that this, half a point really was not as aggressive as people think, just because of its historical context. You know, I have don't ask me. Again, you can ask my ex-wife how well I am with numbers, but the bottom line is, it seems like there's a strong recession that could be brewing, and that the Fed is not acting aggressively enough. And while the jobs numbers have been, good, but coming from where they've been, it still is far from an indicator of any sense of a strong economy growing. In fact, quite the opposite.
You guys. Oh, go ahead. Nancy.
I was just going to say, I don't know enough about economics to make any kind of informed comment about this, other than to say, well into the Reagan administration, we had much higher interest rates than we did now, or than we do now. And in fact, I remember talking to, like, in the late 80s, everybody I knew was refinancing and then refinancing again, into the 90s, because the rates kept dropping and dropping and dropping. And, so the idea that high interest rates are crippling to the economy, maybe only if the economy isn't quite used to it. And we've been used to essentially free money for so long that people maybe are, maybe that's a factor here. But certainly, I remember talking to somebody, in the early 80s, and I said, "You're such a talented," I told this story. "You're such a talented reporter. What are you doing at the shitty newspapers?" Like, "I got a 9% mortgage. I can't give up." And that was back when the Fed, the prime was like, 15% at some point. So,
I love these first world problems and being able to talk about them in this kind of way. As my friend who lives up in Houghton, who's from Detroit, went to Cass, went to Iuds law, Wayne State, and all that stuff, has been up there forever, would say, my people up here don't give a damn about the stock market. They're not invested in it. They're trying to make it. And so if the stock market tanks, they could give a care about that. I can say the same thing, in many areas. Detroit, and just go up to 75, look left and look right. The ticking up doesn't, bother them one way or another. Going down doesn't bother them one way or another. Folks are still buying penny candy, man. So, are we going to be in a recession? What does that mean?
People are still buying penny candy. I don't get what that has to do with this. What do you mean?
Right. Okay. Well, penny candy is still available, and you buy it and you eat it, and as opposed to being able to get a Kit Kat, which may be $1.29 now, as opposed to 89 cents.
Okay,
you're still eating penny candy because you were always eating penny candy. You were always getting penny candy, and that was the deal. And so, when we start talking about recessions and the world is falling apart, and your mortgage rate going up, Detroit for example, is a city of renters. And so the idea of them being fluctuated, by changes in these interest rates doesn't really, jive with them, doesn't really help them one way or another. Now, the price of gas, cash, not credit, has a bigger impact than the stock market going up or down. And, I've noticed in the last few days, the price of gas for, using cash went from like $3.99 to $4.19. Now you can still get $3.99 if you go down closer to the 94 in like Caju and over in that way. But, at Alter and Jefferson, it's $4.19 and stuff like that. And so look at cash, price things according to cash, because that's, people are using debit cards and they're accepted as cash. But if we're going to have a discussion about a recession and the economy and stuff like that, then we really need to be having this discussion, not on how like somebody on Lakeshore Drive is going to live and make ends meet, but how the people who are going to be impacted the most trying to make it from day to day are going to make it or not.
But you know what, Greg? And here's what happens. You make a great point that the Democrats will wring their hands over for the next 15 years without figuring out a simple message. And the GOP will seize what you just said and turn it into this. Like this woman being interviewed in Ohio for the Senate primary the other day that said she's worried about these crazy immigrants, illegal immigrants coming in over the border and somehow destroying the Ohio economy. I mean, the bottom line is, if you get into facts matter, is that the GOP is going to take this inflationary issue. Well, first, Biden's destroying the economy. We all know that. But here's the reality, folks. Greg's right. Forget about all that, because what it is immigration's destroying your livelihood.
Right.
I mean, it's
you know what? It's interesting.
A really economic discussion.
It's a perfect time to open up more to immigration. We have a worker shortage.
Exactly.
It's a perfect opportunity. Countries all around the world bring in people from other countries to work when they have worker shortages. We are still, it's all such a political thing that's undermining our economy, really.
Ask that lady in Ohio if she wants to start butchering chickens in a slaughterhouse to, or does she want to see a worker shortage, which will drive the price of chicken up?
How about picking cherries north in Traverse City? Or
picking cherries, or any number of millions of other things that are disproportionately staffed by immigrants, and a lot I
want you guys to look around I want you guys to look around as you drive and do your thing this week. It used to be a time when I would look around and I would see a roofing crew, and it would mainly be Albanians. I would see the gardening crew or the people cutting grass, and a lot of them would be, folks from, South America and stuff like that. I'd go to the car wash and I would see the same thing, these sort of cash businesses that were hiring people who were immigrants, largely maybe undocumented, and this, that, and the other, and paying them. Now I've seen a switch where I'm seeing Black folks working at the gas stations. I'm seeing folks, Americans on these crews. I'm seeing white dudes cutting lawns and all this stuff. And it is amazing to me that we are having this discussion about the economy and about immigration, but we're not talking about it in a way that allows for us to see this cash sort of like thing and how people are trying to get by. There are a lot of people that are not part of this economic system. Not in the way that we're talking about.
I agree. Yeah, you're
right. Not in the way that we're
spot-
talking about. And so, that lady in Ohio who's talking about immigrants destroying her economy and stuff like that, she's, I don't know, maybe she's pissed because she's seeing Black folks cutting her lawn. I don't know.
Right.
You can spot an Albanian on a roof? Man, I have to hear him talk for a while, but go ahead.
Yeah, because they're when they're roofing, they're talking.
Oh,
you know what?
And Greg knows Albanian.
Yeah.
Look what happened.
Zdravstvuyte, kak bazivir. I had a couple years of Russian, so I can hear.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Greg. I talked to a real Albanian the other day. No, I mean, seriously, I got an Albanian friend down here, owned a restaurant here in Milan area. For years, employed a bunch of people, paid a lot of state tax, this tax, that tax. He's worked harder than anyone I know in my life, employed a lot of people, does a lot of good. It's taken him years to try and get citizenship here. Years. Over 15 years. He says, my brother went to London, got citizenship within about a year and a half, 2 years. Another brother went to Greece. He came here. We're spending years and years and years. This guy's paying taxes, employee taxes, wages, but we make it impossible to get citizenship to someone that truly wants to work and contribute to the community.
One point, Greg, just to make, you're talking about driving up I-75. I think these communities don't realize that they actually are tied into stock markets. Many of them will go ahead and have pension funds and municipal bonds and all kinds of economic devices, which then help to burnish their budgets. That's a message that doesn't come out as far as showing the connectivity, and that's why a lot of the public doesn't really understand that those ideas about the share prices going up and down might affect them depending on what the mutual fund portfolio is that their local government might have them in.
Looking like another bad day on Wall
Ann,
Street so
there's
far.
this lady on here named Ann who's saying that rents go up, Greg. Come on.
Yeah.
Yep. The rent is going to go up in Birmingham. You could believe that. Right there at 11 Mile and Main Street over there in Royal Oak and stuff like that, and those $1 million condos that they're renting out, you doggone Skippy, those rents are going to go up. But rent ain't going up in the ghetto. They're not. That ain't going to happen. Not like it is in Birmingham.
All right, Greg, you're going to have to turn in your Gen X card because Pity Candy and that last thing you said are like pre-boomer. You might as well go 23 skidoo on this. So speaking about what you did with the Beatles, they played the Hollywood Bowl back in 1964. Dave Chappelle played Hollywood Bowl this past weekend for the Netflix Comedy Festival and got assaulted on stage where somebody jumped up, a 23-year-old rapper wannabe by the name of Isaiah Lee, and tackled him. He was shortly then dispatched by Chappelle's entourage, including Jon Stewart, who kicked him.
Not dispatched. Dispatched.
I've got something on the Dave Chappelle.
Okay.
Here, tackling Dave Chappelle at the Hollywood Bowl venue in Los Angeles is in custody. 23-year-old Isaiah Lee is being held on suspicion of assault with a deadly weapon. Authorities say he was carrying this replica handgun with a knife blade.
Ladies and gentlemen.
TMZ video shows the assailant climbing on stage and attacking Chappelle in the middle.
Wow.
I love how TMZ is always there.
Well, I have not been following this story as much as some people may have. They said wannabe rapper. I mean, is there any obvious motive for this attack? I mean,
there doesn't seem to be a motive that has been stated yet. He's apparently there's some rumors that he was motivated less by Will Smith than by Donald Trump, as far as being emboldened to violence. But it seems as though it's inescapable, the fact that what happened at the Oscars might have had some factor. In fact, Chris Rock was there at the show, and he came out and asked, "Was that Will Smith?"
Right.
What does this say then about the climate that we have in the country, where people feel that sense of empowerment and impunity?
It's anger, rage, and the ability to manifest it freely.
And it's also a dangerous mix of removing guardrails, norms, whatever those are. It gets back to why I'm afraid to put a lawn sign up, Greg. I mean, you got people emboldened now. There's a culture of, stop being a bunch of left-wing wimps, and stand up and be heard and act.
Back in my psychology days, boundaries and limitations were really important. It's how healthy relationships were formed.
Mm-hmm.
You knew how far you could go, what not to do, and you respected people's boundaries. You respected their limitations as well as your own. And that seems to be gone. Socially, politically, even artistically, again, Dave Chappelle can't get on stage without getting tackled. That's terrifying. It is a deterioration of the norms, of these boundaries and limitations he's always accepted. The entertainers on the stage, I'm watching in my seat. Right. That was broken. It was broken at the Oscars, and it's reviews. I mean, I just think this is something that is just a manifestation of a sickness. It's a pathology. This is the pathology of what we are. And you have to look at it as a manifestation of a symptom of a deeper sickness.
I think there was I remember something that Roger Ebert wrote about this. It was just a throwaway line, but he was talking about how when he started covering movies, that movie stars could occasionally move among mere mortals, that you'd see somebody on the street in New York or in LA, and now they have to roll with security 3 deep, in part because of these incidents. I mean, the Jodie Foster, John Hinckley, Ronald Reagan triangulation was a big wake up call, as was the John Lennon assassination. But it didn't used to be like this, and we didn't need guardrails, and now we just need we need even more guardrails
and guards.
I mean, imagine going to a show 5 years from now, going to see Dave Chappelle, going through a fucking metal detector or I mean, it's going to be, we're going toward this security state, and I'm really not looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to seeing
guys. Really? Seriously? They used to throw bottles at people on stage.
Yeah, that's true.
They used to throw bottles at people on stage.
Tomatoes.
For playing bad music. One of the things that's happened in both these instances that we're talking about.
I mean, is that a good thing or what? I'm kind of.
No,
he's saying that
the idea that society is crumbling because Dave Chappelle gets tackled and what's his name, Chris Rock gets smacked. I'm not buying that. Well, what I am buying is that we are not paying enough attention to people's mental health. These are signs of how our mental health care system has broken down. This guy that tackled Dave Chappelle was homeless and had been in and out of mental institutions for many, many years.
Yep.
You know, what's his name? The actor, Will Smith, when he got up there, it was like he snapped. Clearly, he snapped. You know, I think that, you know, these are wake-up calls more than anything else, that we need to do more when it comes to mental health. That guy that shot up that subway train in New York, what if he he can't be anything else but crazy. There was no terrorist logic behind that or anything. I mean,
but you know what, Greg?
Folks are nuts and they're running around and we're not doing anything.
But Greg, until you make a national priority of our health system, mental health, instead of the fear of being weak for being on a couch, and instead of being strong to look internally and confront yourself, we're screwed. I mean, this country, we're a bunch of frontiersmen, go conquer, you know, be a self-made man, blah, 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 blah. But what about putting a priority on, I've got a client yesterday in my office. I'm seeking help, Mr. Plotkin. How often you go? Well, once a week, I get 8 visits from my healthcare plan. 8 visits!
Yeah.
Give me a fucking break. There's I don't know how we address that, but let me shut up because that's for another time.
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, these things are all connected, man. I mean, that guy that tackled Dave Chappelle, he's got Nancy and my man Joel thinking that society is falling apart without addressing that the dude is nuts.
No, but you can't deny there is our collective mental health is low right now because of COVID, because of the political divisiveness. As a nation, mentally health-wise, the incidence of suicide is high. Everything, all the indicators of a really sad, anxious, and depressed collective people are there. And so our collective mental health is god-awful. And yes, these instances, this gentleman who has his own history, but I still see it as a manifestation of something greater. I think that we have been in a disease process for years now, and now it's rearing its ugly head. And you're going to see more of these types of events because that's where we are. And so the pathology of the nation sucks, and we got to address that. And I don't know how you do that when you have, people who refuse to accept some basic universal laws of how we should deal with each other, and those who think they're entitled to so much more in such a different place to be.
You guys are cops and crime folks. I mean, how come we don't address this more when we face these serious issues? That kid that shot up that high school in Oxford, clearly.
Well, Sandy, I mean, look, Sandy's put it, I mean, it's a low priority. We just don't understand pay up front or pay later. And we're always willing to pay later.
Yeah.
And you know what the big answer in Oakland County is to the crumbly kid? No one can say his name in the courtroom with his parents' trial.
And clear backpacks.
Happened.
Don't forget that one. Clear backpacks. So there you go.
All I know, Joel, is you're talking about your description about America. I didn't move here to face this. I could have gotten this in England with the accent.
Right, so how's it for you? I mean, so truly, I mean, that disappointment, though, that sense of I didn't, my expectation of what we would be isn't this, and it's my expectations of what we would be is not what we are. Okay, and it's difficult to reconcile that.
I could have had this back there and some good lousy food. All right, we are at that stage of our show where I'm going to kick it to Allan. Schmuck. I think we need to have a quiz as to which movies were repped there, but leave that to another episode. So, who wants to go first with Schmuck of the Week?
Nancy's got a good one.
Nancy.
Oh, okay. Well, I have to always have a backup Schmuck too. So I'm going to go with my primary Schmuck, and this is actually nominated by our former host of this show, Craig Foley. So I might have missed this one. You know, I moved to Detroit from a much smaller TV market, and I really kind of miss the level of sheer unprofessionalism that you see in a higher than 100 or lower than 100, broadcast market. It was because it was really entertaining sometimes, but you can capture that experience if you have cable and watch Netflix, or I'm sorry, not Netflix, Newsmax, One American News, Right Side Broadcast Network, which all seems to hire like kids straight out of Hillsdale who haven't quite figured out that you're supposed to move the microphone back and forth when you interview somebody. But anyway, they apparently have this guy on Newsmax named Grant Stinchfield, which is a very Newsmaxian name, and he has a show, the Grant Stinchfield Show. And he offered, and of course, because conservative media doesn't think overturning Roe v. Wade is nearly the story as who leaked the opinion, he's concentrating on the leak, and he, with no evidence whatsoever, accused the Ketanji Brown Jackson, the incoming justice,
Right.
who he said she's his suspect number one. And even though she's not on the court, she doesn't even have an email for the court yet. She has no access to the computer network. He doesn't care, but she's a scary black woman, and he's going to put his finger on her. And for that, he's my schmuck of the week.
Yeah,
So
but to
there
be
you go.
fair, Nancy, I think the leak happened through a Hotmail account.
It was AOL.
Yeah, AOL.
Hey, I resemble that. I've got an AOL
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm an elitist.
I keep that for nostalgia reasons. It's like that Seinfeld episode where you lose the 212 area code and hell breaks loose. Okay, Sandy, who's yours?
All right, I'm going to do an homage to a curmudgeon attorney who lives downriver who loves donuts. I won't name him by name.
Okay.
Morgan. So, in any event, when I say Joe Biden is not only the schmuck of the week, but for like the last 40 years, because he sat back in his recliner chair with his hands behind his head while Anita Hill was attacked viciously, as he was chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and failed to call corroborating witnesses. And then as the Democratic Party would lay back and allow what we've been bitching about for the last hour to eventually happen. And now he is president of the United States. And for all those reasons in between those hearings and today, I'm just going to make old Joe the schmucka.
I think he can handle that. I think that's a good one. Yeah, I think that's a
an
good
homage to Bob Morgan.
Very kind. Very kind. Yeah.
Greg.
My schmuck of the week is Vicky White, that former corrections officer who absconded with the prisoner and is now on the lam. It's like, why would you do that?
Right.
I mean, he's
True love.
He's one of those people that needs the mental health thing here going on. My understanding is she's a widow and this, that, and the other. But I mean, you just put the guy in the back of the patrol car and ride off into the sunset. So I mean,
he really understands me. So
he's the only one who listens.
Yeah,
that is my
listens.
smug, betraying the public confidence. The whole nation is fascinated and sort of terrorized at the same time of the story. And
that's a good one.
It's just like, wow, man.
Yeah, but
she got tired of Tinder.
Actually, the silver lining is I think she gets conjugal visits for a while, right? Okay, Joel.
They haven't caught her yet, have they? I didn't think
Not
they
yet.
caught her.
True love, man. True love.
And the guy's like 6'7" and tatted up. I mean, he ain't hard to spot. So
they're probably in that same warehouse in the Eastern Market where they found the Crumley.
Where the Crumley. Good point. My schmuck of the week is just going to be Susan Collins again. She's just spineless, duplicitous, hypocritical. Just can't stand her.
Yeah.
Just can't stand her. So she I'm disgusted by her.
Yeah.
I'm troubled by that. And
I mean, if
She's
she had-
Katharine Hepburn at 96.
if
I'm
she-
making fun of her spasmodic dysphonia, but I don't
That's
care.
awful.
if-
Too bad.
if you-
I
bad.
Yes, you're cruel.
It is. I don't care. She's awful. She
bad.
deserves
She's the
it.
worst.
Yeah.
Alan.
My schmuck of the week is Elon Musk. The whole Twitter thing. I think it is so crazy. Here's a guy talking about freedom of speech. He's in cahoots with the Chinese over his company, trying to get people, suppress people to criticize the company in China. He's got now investing with them Saudi Arabians.
Oh,
He's got
wonderful.
the Qatar is, I think, the proper. He's got a big company, $375 million from Qatar, 1.9 billion from Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia, all those countries are so oppressive when it comes to free speech. They don't allow it. And he's talking. I mean, the guy, he's a danger. He's a danger to our society, I think.
Yeah. Well,
All right.
He's also a little bit crazy. So
Yeah.
a little bit.
Somehow or the other, nobody got any of my 3 deep
Let me guess.
schmucks.
I was
Okay.
going to go Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, any of those two? I thought maybe they
No.
would. Oh, damn it.
So the easy one would have been Madison Cawthorn. That would have been way too easy. But I'm going to go with my schmuck of the week is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh,
Fair enough.
They have announced their inductees to include Duran Duran, Pat Benatar, Eminem from Detroit, Eurythmics, Dolly Parton, Lionel Richie, Carly
oh my
Simon,
God.
Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, Judas Priest, among others. But
Wait, are these the nominees or these people?
no,
all
these are
going
the
in?
inductees.
Got it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And yet another glaring omission
MC.
is Detroit's own MC5,
Yep.
Yep.
who were spurned again, who, by the way, played last night at El Club with just one surviving original member, Wayne Kramer, except the tickets were a C note. That was a little bit too much
That's
for me.
ridiculous.
Wow.
Yeah. But I mean, one of the most influential bands of, and I know this is kind of a unparliamentary phrase, rock and roll history. I have nothing against Dolly Parton.
She tried to
or-
decline, as I recall. She
She
said,
and then she was actually cowed to get back into it.
yeah.
But Lionel Richie with the Commodores, maybe. Lionel Richie's Hello, Is It Me You're Looking
No,
For?
that's it. When you're talking about that era, you have to refer to him as Mr. Lionel Richie, because that's what he always went by.
hey,
Mr.
Lionel Richie. Love that guy. He says my song all night long. All night long.
He's
You remember
not
that?
rock and roll.
And
Sorry,
now he says, while it won't be all night long, you will get a fierce 15 minutes. Fierce 15 minutes. I'm like,
You're right.
I hear you, my brother.
Saeed is absolutely right. Leaving the MC5 out is
It's a travesty.
And Greg, I know you're dancing on the ceiling about this, but some of us are not.
Mr. Lionel.
Mr. Lionel Richie. All right, listen, thank you all. Thank you all. At least we could end with a little bit of levity on a show where we certainly had some very serious issues to discuss.
Yep.
Thank you again, Joel Sklar, Sandy
you.
Plotkin, Greg Bowens, Nancy Derringer, and
you guys.
again,
You're the
with
best.
the last word to Alan.
Drive home safely.
Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. Bye-bye.